Hello, everyone. Welcome to the press conference for Reluctant Fundamentalist. Just a few points before we begin. No flash photography during the press conference, and as the talent enters the room, photographs may be taken, but once they make their seats, just the 6 accredited photo agencies are allowed to take photographs. TIFF will make photos from the press conference available on the media site within 24 hours, and our volunteers with microphones will be moving around the room to handle questions. So when you ask your question, please remember to identify yourself and your media outlet. Make sure your cell phones are off, and the press conference will be streamed live at tiff.net. Our moderator for this session is Henri Bihar, and it's now my pleasure to welcome the director, producer, screenwriters, and cast of the film, The Reluctant Fundamentalist. Thank you.
White. Hello.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the press conference for the Reluctant Fundamentalist. With us today, starting next to me, she's the co-story writer and co-producer Ami Bogani. At the far end of the table, Lydia Dean Pilcher. She's the producer. Sitting next to her, if I am not mistaken, yes, Kiefer, as Jim, Mr. Wall Street himself, Kiefer Sutherland. Sitting next to him, as Erica, the photographer, Kate Hudson. Skip one, as the lead, Mr. Riz Ahmed. And sitting next to, at the middle of the table, center of the table, the lady who brought them all together and orchestrated the work, Miss Mira Nair.
All right!
And I guess the first question will go to you, Miss Nair. Those who know you or those who've met you in Toronto over the years, because you've come here fairly often, know you're a firebrand and a lady who reacts very quickly to events. Yet, this film comes 11 years after September 11. Did you think it was necessary to let 10 years go by before tackling this kind of story?
In truth, the film was not inspired directly by 9/11. It was, for me, the first inspiration to make The Reluctant Fundamentalist came from visiting Pakistan for the first time 6 years ago. And as a child in modern India, you know, we don't easily cross the other side, the country which was once one country. But my father was from Lahore and raised us kind of Lahori in India. So the music, the poetry, the culture of what is now Pakistan is part of my blood. And when I first went there, it was deeply moving, and I wanted to immediately make a tale about contemporary Pakistan, because most Indian directors, most of us really know the partition on film. We don't know what it's like now in Lahore. And especially living half my life as I have in New York City, I also know what is seen or known of Pakistan, or the subcontinent really, from the western side, which is rarely anything to do with what it feels like to be in the street of Lahore today. So I wanted very much to make that kind of dialogue, and reading Mohsin Hamid's brilliant and elegant mind game of a book, The Reluctant Fundamentalist, about 6 months after I was in Lahore, was just, I just knew I had to do it, and because not only did it give me that portrait of a country we never see and hear about, and never hear the characters who are born and, you know, who are throbbing in that part of the world, but we also don't really see an amazing and I hope elegant dialogue with America, and that is what the book gave me. But at its heart, for me, it is a coming of age story. It is a story about how a young man in the global landscape of today, how a young man finds out who he is. He's in love with one thing, he almost achieves it, and then he falls out of love, and what is that journey, and how do we see ourselves in this now increasingly sad divide between the East and the West?
Question addressed to the actors mostly. how did you react when you got the script? Ouch or yay?
Yeah. Ouch. How did you react when you got the script? Ouch or yay? Henri believes in little words like ouch and yay.
I could have a question that's a mile long.
Well, for me personally, I had a very visceral and immediate reaction, which was incredibly positive. Having done 24, which was actually born out of a fantasy, an idea, because it took place before 9/11, and then the terrible events of 9/11 happened. I was very keenly aware that as a country, and having lived in America, we were very focused on, and I think rightfully so, on the casualties of 9/11, the people that were on the planes and the people that were in the buildings. But I think certainly over 10 years, I was keenly aware of the kind of collateral damage. And there were a lot of things that I had seen that were happening in the United States that ranging from everything from profiling to murder to really egregious crimes to people of either the Muslim faith or of coming from the East. And it was the first piece that I had read that actually addressed that. And I think one of the exciting things about making a film like this for the U.S. is I think the U.S. has a unique ability to look at itself in a really positive way. And so I'm excited for people to see this. But my reaction to it was very strong. No one was having this discussion that Mira was promoting through this film. And I think so many things have unfortunately happened because of great misunderstandings, whether they be religious, cultural, nationalistic. But this film addressed that. And so for me, it was a very exciting opportunity.
Kate?
Yeah, when I first read the script, I saw it as an enormous challenge for a filmmaker. And knowing that Mira was at the helm of it, I felt that it was going to be extremely provocative and delicately woven. And I just wanted to be a part of her being able to tell that story. That's how I felt about the script.
Mr. Ahmed?
Well, Mira's one of my favorite directors and someone I always wanted to work with. And the novel was a novel that I absolutely loved. As soon as I'd read it, I was immediately fantasizing about, this would make an amazing film, and I wonder if it'll ever get made. And so the combination of a book I love, a character I'd already fallen in love with, and Mira meant that I was desperate to be involved, even before I'd seen a script, to be honest. As Kate says, I was just really intrigued to see how she would adapt it, because it is such a particular kind of, narrative device in the novel with monologue and stuff. And when I did get it, and when I read it, and I saw the way it was adapted with the kind of thriller element in the present tense, I just thought it was incredibly ambitious. The scope of it, just kind of an epic scope, and it's a romantic, story. It's a thriller. It's a coming of age story. It's about identity, and I just felt like it was such a rich tapestry. So, yeah, I was desperate to be involved.
Sir?
Bruce Kirkland, Toronto Sun. I'm curious, from you and I sat together on the morning of 9/11 by coincidence, and somebody came in the room and said, turn the TV on, and it was Between the Planes. And for me, you are inextricably linked to my personal feelings about that day and everything that came from it. So thank you for returning to it as a filmmaker. So I'm curious, because you very eloquently described how this film is not about that event, but it's about something that more profoundly moves you now. But how does that event and what came out of it mean to you now? Is it a cloud? Is it a metaphor? Is it a instructive look into humanity? How do you grapple with that in order to tell a story like this?
Well, actually, not in an immediate knee-jerk way at all. I mean, it's it wasn't even inspiring when it happened as a story for me. It was just, as you know, just this absolutely outrageous, shocking, inexplicable event. And of course, I was directly affected because my family was almost on that plane, a plane like it, to come to Toronto that morning, because we were going to have the world premiere of Monsoon Wedding that night. And unfortunately, they weren't on the plane. And so, of course, immediately it was how to reach everyone I loved who was, were they safe or not. I mean, Lydia Pilcher lived down the block from what is Ground Zero, and I couldn't reach her for 4 days. And so it was on that level, like many people, but especially as a New Yorker, deeply shocking. But the world did begin to change post that, and I was definitely, me and my family, people who look like us, were definitely affected in very, the first reaction I had was what I tried to show in the 9/11 short film, a part of the compilation feature that 11 directors did, which was a year later, about a true story about a young Pakistani man who did not come home that day in New York, and what happened to him. That's another story. But so it's more seeing the world and what has happened in this decade, more seeing the terrible prophecy of what Bush said, either you're with us or against us, either you're a bad guy or you're a good guy. And that wall that is increasingly given us not much more than great wars everywhere is what propelled me to, try to find something that would be a bridge maker, would tell us this myopia that we have of the other side, both sides, would to make a conversation that could happen, a dialogue that was instilled with intelligence and hopefully, love. And a great anchor for me was Gilles Pontecorvo's Battle of Algiers, because in that film he talks of both the French and the Algerian with the same grace and the same intelligence and unbelievable pain as well. And so it was first Mohsin Hamid's elegant novel, and then Ami Bogani and Mohsin and Bill Wheeler, and we grappled for 3 years to make that monologue of a book into this adaptation that you see. So that was the star for me. That was the talisman. And one of the great gifts of opening the Venice Film Festival was this lovely older woman coming towards me at the end of the movie and saying, "I'm Gillo Pontecorvo's widow, and I want to tell you that Gillo lives in you." And that was just that was the greatest gift that I have received for this film, because that is what the intention is, the balance, the seesaw, the journey.
The gentleman here, person over there.
Hi Mira, Asim Chabra from Mumbai Mirror. I agree with you that the book, of course, is complicated because it is a monologue. But the choices you made in terms of adding to the story, especially Liv Schreiber's character, you define him much more. While the biggest strength of the book is actually the end. It just rattles you. You don't know who's a terrorist and who's an agent and who's a fundamentalist. Why were those choices made, and how did you guys come to that sort of decision?
Well, the book is a monologue of a Pakistani man talking to an American who doesn't say a word. I mean, that's not going to sell any tickets. And I'm just joking, but it's not exactly, that's not a movie. It's a book is a springboard from which you make something that you want to go into a room for 2-3 hours and be involved in that world. Actually, I'd love to ask Ami, one of the writers of the film, to answer that question, because, but before I do that for a moment, I mean, this notion of can a settler become a native? Can an outsider ever belong? Is a theme that has inspired me, enraged me, got me involved for years, and I wanted to, filmmakers, that's the privilege of the filmmakers, is just, this is a world I want to inhabit. So I wanted to see very much that character who, like many people we know, who makes another country their home, and to a point where their own country forgets them, and then they lose their way, and what happens at that moment. And of course, it's much more heavy with the politics of today. So that was my intention for Liev's character as well. But please let Ami answer this in terms of the structure.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things that Mohsin is such a master of his craft, and he understood his own story and how to tell it so well that with his words he created this kind of thriller that envelopes this these two men sitting across from each other at a table. And so for us, we wanted to, when we started to adapt it, and Mohsin was incredibly, he just saw it as a challenge to take his own work to the next level. We were challenged to basically take that very simple structure and translate it into a visual language that would give you the same sense and feeling of not knowing where your loyalties lie and kind of challenging your own perceptions about who is what and all of that, but doing it on the screen and being as effective as he was able to be in the book.
Our skein, the thread that we tried to follow, because it's many complex stories interwoven to, I hope, a fluidity of storytelling. And the skein was a tightrope. The question we used to always ask ourselves is he or isn't he? You know, and that involved both the Bobby role and the Chinguez role, that you constantly are on this tightrope. You don't know. And everything, the design of the film, especially the shooting of the film, the sound design of the film, is all about that tightrope. You know, sometimes the screen is drained of sound, so you sort of have a surreal moment, and then you come in with the sound. There are things like that that I'm trying to do, where you have alter realities while you're watching a reality of sorts.
There was a remark this morning after the press screening, which I overheard among the people who had seen the film this morning, which concerned your character, Miss Hudson. Someone said something along the lines of, ultimately Erica is, in a way, the bad guy of the movie. Unwittingly so, unwillingly so, unawarely so, I don't know. But you seem to be, and the word was used, a metaphor for America and the rest of the world, culturally or emotionally. Did that come into play, or is this something, am I being too French here?
How do I answer that? Mira?
While you think, go ahead.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, because you know, it's funny because you sit back and you see a film and you know your motivation as an actor is sometimes very isolated versus when you sit back and watch the film as a whole. You know, so that's a difficult question for me to answer.
I mean, I saw the character in the book more a metaphor for America, and that's why we wanted to make a flesh and blood, complicated human being who doesn't give up on life in the way the book Erica did.
Yeah, in the book she definitely is.
Yeah, and
gives up.
So I just, you know, so that's why we wrote her as an artist. And it was actually someone who is struggling, who is unwittingly, I mean, who thinks that in her art and with her love, actually, she's doing something more nobling than mocking, but not actually having a clue about the fact that taking what they shared and making it something that was at its heart sort of not particularly well understood or felt was a transgression that couldn't make this relationship really last.
Yeah, it's almost like, you know, at least from where I came from as an actor, it's just that this is a young girl who grew up in a high society family who never really understood consequences to her actions. And then suffered a great tragedy and was trying to discover that part of herself again. And felt like an outsider and connected with this young man because on that, which they both sort of felt a little bit like outsiders. And they were trying to bridge that gap, which becomes an overall metaphor for what this film is just in terms of the human connection and human connections. I think what's interesting about what you're saying is that this film is open to that dialogue of how people will interpret it for themselves. And at the end of it, I think what Mira has done so brilliantly is that you discover that it really is about the human connection, and how we seek to understand each other, in order to really find our own truths.
Thank you, sir.
art page from India abroad. A question from Meera Nair and Amin. You said it took about 3 years in shaping the screenplay from the novel. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in doing that?
In the adaptation?
In the adaptation.
Well, first we started, Mohsin and Ami started writing the first 2 drafts, and I was sort of the mother hen of it, and the second draft was written in Lahore in Mohsin's study. And first it was to create the foundation of what I was interested in, which is the Pakistani family, you know, making people feel alive, making the ideas of the 2 fundamentalisms quite palpable in the structure of it, and making Erica, sort of inventing Erica as to be what she finally became. And then we went through a process of missing or not knowing whether we should include the more literary device of the 2 men in a cafe talking to unite it or not. And then we decided to go back to that novel structure and decided to really make the thriller much more the tapestry of the film that would tie in these multi-layered stories of identity, of globalization, of the fundamentalisms of the world. So it was how to get that through line that would capture the different layers of this film. That was the simplicity, the fluidity is the hardest thing, and rhythm and all of that pace. I'm so blessed with the editing of Shimit Amin, who's a great director in his own right in Bombay, who edited this film, because it's an editing kind of tour de force in terms of keeping us to our seats, but always wanting to know and not knowing what might happen. So to get that structure in the writing took a long time, and Bill Wheeler really finally, his knowledge really and skill helped us to achieve what we are finally at. Yeah.
Question here, microphone. Oh, you have it. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Michael from ctv.ca, and this question is for Riz. I'm just curious if you felt any pressure or challenges in playing a character that kind of turns negative Muslim stereotypes on its head, and if you pulled from any real-life experiences or stereotypes from your own life post 9/11.
Well, you know, as Kate was saying earlier, sometimes when you're kind of approaching playing a character, you try and kind of approach it more from the emotional perspective and try and get into their headspace rather than looking at what that character might serve to do in the bigger picture of the film, or in audiences, you know, in terms of challenging their assumptions about the world. You were mentioning kind of Muslim stereotypes and stuff. So I think actually sometimes I can find it a bit distracting or unhelpful to second guess those secondary things that the character might do in an audience's head, and try to kind of stay more with who this guy is. And really in terms of approaching Cengiz from that perspective, I felt like on paper, on a surface level, we shared a lot. I've also experienced kind of growing up between classes and cultures. But once you get past that surface level, and I hope that's kind of one of the central messages of the film, is that we are more than the labels slung around our necks. Once I went on that journey, it became much more about trying to get to know this guy who was actually quite different to me, and learning how to be a private equities analyst and a management consultant, and learning Urdu poetry, and going to the gym a painful amount.
With Kate Hudson.
Yeah, and all that. So,
well, kind of.
So yeah, not at the press conference. Yeah, so yeah, it was more the kind of from a emotional thing that I tried to approach it, and trying to build the person.
Sir.
Hi. Hello, Simon Haupt from the Globe and Mail. 2 questions, actually, if I may. One for Riz. It has to do with whether or not you spoke with Mohsin at all, because the book is, while not his life story, certainly inspired by elements in his life. And I'm curious to know whether you had any conversations with him directly, or whether you worked merely from the screenplay. And the second question is for Meera. Last night, I believe, Piers Handling, just before the screening, referred to you as a very courageous filmmaker, and said that this was a film that needed to be made by somebody like you. Can you articulate how you believe this film required bravery or courage in making?
You go first.
So I've completely forgotten your question. Mohsin, yes. So I spoke with him endlessly, and one of the big reasons behind that was I don't know. I kind of feel like it's incredibly exciting as an actor to have such a massive well to draw on, a novel, you know, that kind of just really goes into the psychology of a character and gives you lots of stuff that, you know, aren't in the text of a screenplay that you can draw on and try and kind of bring that into the subtext of a scene or whatever. And then to have the novelist at hand as well, you know, you can really kind of crack out on that stuff and just, constantly hassle him. And I did, and he was happy to be a massive help. And he was just a massive guiding light on the whole process, you know, and he co-wrote the first draft of the script. He had a lot of insights, and some of the most valuable ones were about Lahore, because it's a very particular place. You know, it's an ancient capital of a massive empire. It's also, you know, the cultural capital of Pakistan, which is a very vibrant but also very troubled country in lots of ways. And he has a really particular vibe. I've never been there, and I was unable to go, sadly, because of insurance repercussions, you know, which is heartbreaking. And so a lot of it was about kind of, you know, trying to get a Lahore vibe of Mohsin, and also of Ali Sethi, who's a fantastic young novelist from Lahore, who was also around to help with that.
Because people don't realize that Riz is a bloke from England who really is Pakistani, but isn't, you know, really living in Pakistan at all. And so to convince a Lahori, you know, what it is to speak in Urdu, the colloquial interplay between English and Urdu and slang, and with your mother how you speak, with your father how you speak, with your boss how you speak, is not at all easy. I mean, I was, because I'm from there, authenticity was absolutely paramount, which is why it took 200 young men in many, many continents that I saw, because not only did you have to have that skill and fluidity, but you also, you know, had to be believable in all contexts. So it took a long time, and when I finally met Riz, it just the penny dropped instantly. He read the scene cold of the scene with his father, and you know, just the understanding of what we call izzat, you know, which is honor, the honor that he has shamed between his father and him just by saying he's paid for something, is something. It's hard. I mean, I could direct it, but it's good if it comes from your soul, and Riz just nailed it. You know, he just understood that, and that was for me quite instant. So that was how that happened. And my courageous question. Well, I come from a place of intuition, really, and inspiration, and I've been around the block now 25, 30 years making movies, and I understand the privilege of when you feel inspired versus when you don't and you're making a movie, if at all you might have the folly to do that. But and so I really had this great inspiration, because I was so tired of what people did not know and what people really, the commonality we have within each other. I really was. And I knew it would be a leap, but I didn't start thinking brave and courageous. When they start saying brave and courageous, I think they're thinking like my movie sounds like homework, and I don't like that. It should be, of course, courageous. Thank you. Everyone's writing now what I'm saying. But I want it to be, you know, a real trip, a journey in which you see yourself, you know, rather than only courageous or important, or, you know, those kind of things that make me think, do I really want to go to see this film? But it was a very, I have to say, once I got on the journey, and it was really 5 years in the making, and I'm a bulldozer. When I put my mind to a movie, it's usually made in 2 years, thanks to Lydia and her absolute acumen. But this film took us 5 years, and I would say absolutely it's the most difficult film that I've made since Salam Bombay. Because we had every difficulty in the book. No one wanted to meet on it. Financier once got drunk with Lydia and said the truth, which normally they wouldn't say, which is that, you know, darling, I'll give you $1.5 million. You could make it in Rockaway Beach, but, you know, that's what this kind of movie with basically a Muslim at the center of it would cost. And we were determined for the global landscape. We were determined for having a thriller that would make you question, what is this world that you accept? What do we know of what is the other? Is it the other, or is it us? Those were the questions. And so that journey was full of struggle and sacrifice, because it took about 2 years to find the financing, and it was really, from the very beginning, we were fortunate to have Doha Film Institute, and their uncompromising faith in this film, basically. And as other investors fell away, they stayed on and really believed from the beginning. And so we just tightened our belts. We had a great film family on both sides of the continent. We went everywhere in a small band and filmed in 5 places, 5 countries, and got the appetite we wanted, you know. And really, it was these amazing actors and the breath of life they brought to their roles, which makes it something that I hope will, you know, that young people and older people and all kinds of people will see.
Go ahead, Simon.
One follow-up for Lydia. This film, maybe that financier who got drunk was quite right, because in fact the film has yet to sell in North America.
Oh, no, it's selling right now.
Would you like to tell us about that?
Well, you know,
whole idea.
You know, what was challenging about putting the financing together is that people had a hard time sort of understanding what it was going to be. And I think, you know, you could, if you've seen the film, I mean, you can see the, you know, the amount of passion and color and humanity and the music and all the things that we knew were going to be in the film, but the people just reading it on the page don't see that yet. And I've always believed in the international, you know, value of the film, and I think that we've, you know, have had some trepidation about, you know, how it would be received in America, but America is a, you know, extremely important audience because, you know, it's a film about dialogue, and working as much internationally as I do, I'm constantly reminded of how the way the world sees America is not really the way America sees itself. And so I think that's the courage that, you know, we had to take on to make this film, because you know, when 9/11 happened and people in my neighborhood said, how could this happen? I felt like, how could you ask that question? And so there's a lot of dialogue that you know, is yet to come, but I think in the era of globalization, when, you know, we can all communicate much more freely than we ever have before, I think understanding other people's worlds is what the story is about.
Before we give go ahead.
Yeah, Meenakshi Shetty from PTI. Clearly this film obviously has resonance, will have resonances all over the world when it's released. I was curious what you see, in India we already have made some films mainstream. My Name is Khan, Karan Johar, there's New York by Kabir Khan, on exactly this, on the Muslim viewpoint 9 level, and the interaction between both communities. And Firaq, which is quite different, which is also here, or talking of the catastrophe of prejudice, really. Given that these films are already released worldwide, at least, My Name is Khan was a Fox thing, and this is coming a gap later. What do you feel is now, in retrospect, the unique USP of the film, given that there is already this thing, at least for the Indian market, for example?
Well, it sort of takes on, it sort of humanizes the globalization of now through the journey of this young man who really weaves between continents and more than one, and like many of us, begins the journey by being in love with America and really achieving an America that we dream about, and the journey that questions that, you know. So it's much more, the core of the film for me is the conversation about the Janissaries that the Turkish publisher has in the center of the film. It's the reason I wanted to buy this book, is that amazing reflection that someone in the middle of your life or early part of your life can hold a mirror and ask a question that makes you really ponder, what am I doing? Where am I going? Who am I serving? What do I exist on this earth for? And many people don't have that privilege of that mirror being held up to them, and then they suddenly find themselves towards the end of their life. And what about the young who can have that mirror and make a decision that we can see ourselves in? That is very important to me. So I know about these other films, I commend them, but it's not, you know, I don't make films by saying, oh, 3 people have won this much at the box office on that theme, so I must not touch it. No. Because a film is what it has, you know, it's what I was saying earlier. It's that seesaw I wanted to inhabit. It's how little we know of the other. And not just one, the brown other versus the white, this thing, nothing. It's about, like, both sides, but both sides done with I hope a lot of love and great strength. And yes, I would use the word, bravery, but it's not about that, because the humanity that is truly, I find, common is something that inspires me.
All this is translated onto the screen in terms of colors and movements. And you make a very strong distinction between Wall Street, grey, steel, glass, and Lahore, colors, vibrancy, music, whereas it's silence and sort of muffled sounds on Wall Street. How did you work, to what extent did you work with Declan Quinn, who's the cinematographer, and the costume designer? And I have no idea whether the actors had their input about the kind of costumes that they would wear, because he changes colors throughout the film.
Well, it's the great privilege of making cinema, is that you work with artists who, like Arjun Bhasin, like Michael Carlin, the production designer, whose work I had loved in Last King of Scotland, which was based in Uganda, where I live, and he did such extraordinary things with what I know is real there. Anyway, so for me, it was a very concerted decision, of course, with Declan and Michael and Arjun and myself and all of us, really, but to create a universe, and Wall Street, it is that, it's actually shining and kind of elegant, I hope, in its way, but it is that type of glass-filled, reflective universe.
And there's no sun in Wall Street, in the way you filmed it.
That's the amazing thing about being in our part of the world, is that there's never any silence, and it is really shocking when you come from any part of that world to hear how controlled the sound is, and that was the point. Also, the sound is always of cash registers and people speaking like how they do. Hello, this is so-and-so, how can I help you? You don't have a personality, you have a kind of corporate situation. But that's not the case with Williamsburg or where Erica lives, or, those sounds are very, very authentic to New York, and garbage trucks and the world we live in, subways, the rattle. But the colors are truly, of course they are my choices, but they are truly the colors, because the dust and the light and the sun is different in Lahore or Delhi. It creates a much different hue than the clarity of America in the sunlight. So that is part of the reality, but we of course enjoyed every frame. So I love so many colors of indigo and burgundy, and that's what he was dressed in Pakistan.
Can I say something about Mira? She's very aesthetic and very specific about her aesthetic. So when we were working, she's extremely collaborative. I forgot who asked the question.
I did.
You did, okay. But if I had a scarf on, and we would go on and on about the scarves, and there would be 10 different scarves, and then she'd go, okay, and the no bells, and let's take the bells off of that scarf, and very specific about every little detail of anything, eyeliner thing, and she could be doing 100 things at once. But the aesthetic is, you are so specific, and it's so nice to work with somebody, and extremely collaborative, of course. But as Mira says, as long as I have the last word. But it's amazing to work with a director that has that specific of an aesthetic, because it makes you feel like you're in really safe hands when somebody knows directly how they want something to breathe and feel, So I just wanted to add my little experience.
Riz, Kiefer, did you want to add something?
Oh, I think it's been covered.
Sir?
This question is for Kiefer. This is Michael from ctv.ca. My question is, I'm just curious how you interpreted your character. He's kind of seen as a villain in the sense that he was compared to the cell leader at the end of the movie. But at the same time, you're one of the few characters that looked at the main character without any kind of stereotypes and actually helped him achieve the American dream that you wanted him to be. So that's a huge positive. So I'm just curious how you viewed him.
Americans describe America as the land of opportunity, and Jim Cross is an opportunist. And when it suited him to have Changes as his ally, then he had him as an ally. And when it did not suit him, he cut him loose as if they had never met. To me, the character was that black and white. And those simple lines kind of allowed me to play the character the way I did.
I also want to say that for me and Mohsin, I think, and the writers, that Jim Cross is actually not a villain at all. For me, he's in a way the best of America, the largesse of America that I received, you know, of someone who post 9/11 hires a guy with the wrong last name, the wrong color skin, with a beard or without a beard, because he really respects Changez's mind in the sense that he'll get profit from it. He understands where it might take him. And that is the America which is, you don't find in many places in the world. You know, they just invest in your merit, regardless of where you come from. So for me, Jim Cross was person who's seeing that side. Yes, opportunist for sure, really lethal in the mind about what he's on this earth to do, which at that moment is about profit, but also seeing a connection that they were outsiders in a sense. But that is the America that is not, you know, he's not a villain for me at all. Yeah.
I had a question for Meera and probably Lydia also. We keep talking about the colors of Lahore. Did you guys shoot the film at all in Pakistan? And what scenes were there? Because most of it is in Delhi, of course.
Yeah, well, we shot about 4 days of second unit streets. All the exterior streets are in Pakistan and Lahore. You know, the canal was very important to me because Lahore and Delhi are sort of twin cities in certain parts of Delhi, but one thing we don't have, which I was determined to have, was the canal, which runs through Lahore. So the beginning, all the exteriors are Lahore, actually. But we shot for about 25 days, if I recall, in Delhi, where we did the tea house. We built the tea house in Ajmeri Gate opposite the Old Delhi railway station in an old, probably a whorehouse now, or I'm not sure. It was an old Victorian hotel, I think. But we used to Michael Garland used to call it a knock shop, we built, and then we found this extraordinary Art Deco home, which is in Delhi, which is so Lahore, and in fact was built by a Lahori family before the partition, who then went back to Lahore, which I didn't know. So with very acute looking, it's the same flora, fauna, trees, architecture, and the Badshahi Mosque of Lahore is the sister mosque of the Jama Masjid in Old Delhi. So we really tried to interweave the two, and because of using iconic streets in Lahore, well, I think we've convinced the Lahoris. Yeah.
And you recorded music in Pakistan.
Oh, all the music was done in Pakistan with Atif Aslam, the great pop star of Pakistan, singing the two Faiz poems, Mori Araj Suno and Bol, which then Peter Gabriel made into an original song for the end credits, which is quite my dream come true. And all the music, you know, Ustad Sami and all the people I love. I went to Pakistan numerous times to record the score, which Mike Andrews did so extraordinarily in California as well. So, and a lot of actors, you know, like Misha Shafi, the great singer in Pakistan, it's her acting debut in this film. So for me, it was very important that we cast as much, you know, get Pakistani artistry with us, because it's an extraordinary sound, extraordinary music, extraordinary beauty there. And sometimes they emigrate to England and I find them in England. So it was really actually the first Indo-Pakistan, I don't know, but it's an Indo-Pakistani film. And between Mohsin and all of us, it truly is a confluence.
Well, I'm afraid our time is up. Thank you very much for being here, and all the best for the film.
Thank you very much.